So I would like to introduce former Moravia High School student and current 12th grade government teacher and 11th grade U.S. history teacher, Mr. Miller.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Jacob, for the kind words of introduction. For those who are potentially watching at home, I'm assuming you are, and may not know Jacob that well, I should mention, he is the reigning champion of the Moravia Talent Show. So that's a little known fact about Jacob. He had a spellbinding yo-yo routine. So there was just a great memory. So Jacob, you graduated as the champion. You probably didn't think you were going to, but you did. So there you go. Thank you, Jacob. I'd like to start off by thanking a few key groups of people without whom we would not all be here today. First, I would like to thank the administration, Board of Education, faculty, and staff of Moravia Central School for their instrumental roles in the success of each and every student seated in front of me. I would also like to thank the parents, family members, and friends of the graduates for your enduring support, sacrifice, and encouragement shown to these students throughout their educational journeys. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not thank the individuals who we are honoring tonight, the Moravia High School graduating class of 2020. Congratulations on reaching this point in your lives, and thank you for all of your hard work to get to this milestone moment in your lives. I think it's safe to say that this is the most unique graduation ceremony in the history of Moravia High School, and I think that's a good thing. Given unique circumstances, a very creative solution was found to both honor you all tonight, as well as give you all one final send-off as the class of 2020. I applaud the decision makers who had to make tough choices but fought hard to give you all a proper graduation. I was also dreading giving this speech virtually, so I, for one, am happy to have you all as my live audience. That was going to be very bad, and I did not like the idea. So I'm happy we're here. As a matter of introductions for those who are watching at home, as Jacob said, my name is Tyler Miller. I teach 11th grade U.S. history and 12th grade government here at Moravia. I've been teaching here full-time for 3 years and have taught most of these graduates for the last 2. Since then, I've greatly enjoyed my time spent with these students who are graduating tonight. True, there have been many times over the past 2 years in which I was pulling my hair out because of these students. Little known fact, before we went to quarantine, I had a full head of hair and I went bald because of these students, and this is just the regrowth since quarantine, so this is pretty good. True, there have been many times that I've been pulling my hair out, but however, from every frustrating moment, there were countless laughs, deep conversations, and inspiring moments. I think I can safely say that you all will be sorely missed by all of us here at Moravia. Now, I'd like to begin my remarks tonight with a question for you all. What were you doing 3,653 days ago?
Picking my nose.
Okay. No, so for those watching at home, there were some interesting answers. I don't necessarily know if any of those were correct. You act like that might be a strange question. In case you're more of a number of years person rather than a number of days person, 3,653 days is exactly 10 years ago from today. 10 years ago. I hope that helps a little bit. Anyway, if you're anything like me, odds are you have a hard enough time remembering what you were doing last week, not to mention 10 years ago. In that case, let me jog your memory. You all, the graduates, were in 2nd grade. You had just finished 2nd grade. The whole summer was laid out before you on June 26th, and I think I can safely say that those were simpler times indeed. Now that I've given you that question and asked you that idea, allow me to answer that question for myself. While I do not and cannot remember every moment in my life with perfect clarity, there are certainly moments in my life that I can immediately recall. I can distinctly remember them, and those moments serve as milestones in my life, reminding me where I have been in the past and the direction in which I am going in the future. It just so happens that exactly 10 years ago to the day, June 26th, 2010, was one of those milestone moments in my life. At 10 a.m. on that day, I was seated up at the football field where you all just came from. It was a very overcast Saturday morning, and I was surrounded by my classmates who I had attended school with for 13 years. We were participating in a ceremony that many of you will hopefully recognize is the very same ceremony you are currently sitting through. Yes, that's right, 10 years ago to the day was my graduation from Moravia High School. Now, let's think about that. What are the odds that I would be standing here giving the commencement address in front of you all to the graduates of Moravia High School 10 years to the day after my very own graduation from Moravia High School? I'm still astonished with that fact, even though I wrote this in the speech and proofread it half a dozen times. Now, if you would have asked me 10 years ago what I'd be doing on this very date 10 years later, I would have gotten some of it correct. I would have said, well, I hope I'm teaching in Moravia, and I think I got that one right. However, one thing 18-year-old me would never have guessed is that I would be standing here 10 years later giving a commencement address to all of you, my students. You are a group of young adults who have taught and changed me more than I could have ever imagined, and it's an honor to share in this event with you as you complete your education and join me as an alumnus of Moravia High School. Given the occasion, I would like to share with you a story about an experience I had a few years ago. Through that story, I learned a handful of valuable lessons. We will call them lessons for the next 10 years. See what I did there? It's been 10 years? Yeah. It's a tough crowd out here. Wow. My hope is that by hearing what I have to say tonight and following my advice, you'll be just a few steps closer to success in your own lives from where I was just 10 years ago. So let's get right into it. One of my favorite things to do in the 3 warm months we get between winter and winter is hiking mountains. It was a joke. Nobody laughed. Come on. Yeah. Thank you. Deegan Salvacole's back there laughing. Thank you. My love of hiking was born about 5 years ago when I went on a hiking and backpacking trip to the high peaks region of the Adirondacks with two of my college friends. We'll call them Mike and John, mostly because those are their real names. Thank you. Anyway, Mike and John and I set out in August for 3 days of hiking and camping. Mike is a super ambitious person, so he had planned approximately 35 miles of hiking spread over those 3 days. Now, mind you, I had not been hiking in probably 10 years, and I had never hiked a mountain, so this was bound to be a bit of a shock for me. Nevertheless, I set out on this 35-mile journey, very unprepared, with a borrowed backpack and a pair of sneakers on my feet. The first day started out okay, but very quickly I discovered that hiking in the Adirondacks was not the same as hiking in the Fillmore Glen. We were jumping from large rock to large rock, climbing what felt like a never-ending staircase. We hiked about 12 miles the first day to get to a lean-to, and we set up camp. Day 2 was our toughest day, as we reached the summit of one peak by 7 a.m. and moved on to one more before noon. The second peak of the day was also the tallest mountain in New York, Mount Marcy, standing well over 5,000 feet above sea level. We reached the top of the mountain and took off our packs, looked around, snapped a couple photos from the top, and sat down to rest for a few minutes. It was in that moment at the top of Mount Marcy that something happened that I've reflected on frequently over the past few years. There we were, Mike, John, and I, all sitting, looking out over the expansive world beneath us. I guess we were the tallest people in New York at the time, which I think is kind of cool to think about. It was right then that Mike said something that I haven't forgotten since that day. He said to me, "Drink in the view, boys. This makes the journey worth it." At that moment in time, I very much disagreed with him. My mind and my body told me that I had hiked a long way over very difficult terrain, which I did not like, only to get to this point. I saw rocks, trees, clouds, but nothing really remarkable. In that moment, I said to myself, no, the view is not worth that journey that I just went on. It was challenging, it was difficult, and time-consuming, and something that I did not care to repeat ever again. After these thoughts rifled through my head, we started down the mountain and made it to our car a day and a half later. 35 miles in the books, and we were all exhausted. Mike asked John and I if we would ever go hiking, and I gave him a firm no. I said, no, hiking's not for me.
Hard no.
Sure. When I think back on this hiking trip, I'm frustrated by my own behavior. This trip had so much potential to be awesome, but my poor attitude ruined it for me. I focused on the negatives rather than the positives. I chose to be annoyed by my body's aches and pains, my stomach's empty growls, and my soggy sneakers, rather than choosing to appreciate the natural beauty that was surrounding me. So this reflection brings me to the first lesson I'd like to share with you all tonight. I'm assuming that you all have heard the phrase, "You are what you eat." As a kid, when I would hear that, I got really confused. I had a mental image of me turning into a life-size Twinkie, and that made me think twice about eating too many Twinkies. That was a legitimate thought that was in my little kid's head. Come to think of it, that might be why I'm so skinny nowadays. I'm still scared of Twinkies. Well, anyways, as hopefully you all have heard that phrase, have you ever heard the lesser-known phrase, but related phrase, "You are what you think"? It was originally said by one of the great American philosophers and transcendentalists, Ralph Waldo Emerson. If that name transcendentalist sounds familiar, that's because you learned it in my class last year. Okay, so I hope it does.
I cannot say that I recall.
A couple people got it. A couple people got it out there. Yeah. So Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "You are what you think." This saying has been very helpful to me over the past few years. At the heart of it, this motto can be boiled down to this central idea. Your thoughts and ideas determine who you become as a person. Your attitude determines your outcome. When I got to the top of the mountain, all I could do was think negative thoughts. Why did I do this to myself? This was the worst thing I've ever agreed to do in my life. I hate this, etc. And, of course, I had a horrible time. Why wouldn't I? I set myself up with a negative attitude, so I got negative thoughts. And with those negative thoughts, they turned me into a negative person. We are a product of our own thoughts. My body was still feeling those things, and my mind was still thinking them, but I shouldn't have made them my focus. By focusing on all those negatives, I could never see the positives that were staring me right in the face. I was with two of my best friends on an awesome trip, staring out at one of the most beautiful sights I'd ever seen, but I missed all of those good things because I wasn't in the right mindset to appreciate them at the moment. So my first lesson for you is that you are what you think, and that your attitude determines your outcome. This is true on a hiking trip, in school, at work, or wherever you might find yourself. Try hard to be positive when approaching everything that life throws your way. And trust me, it's way better than the alternative of being a negative person all the time. Now, at the very beginning of my story, I told you that hiking is one of my favorite things to do in the summer. So what exactly changed after that first hiking trip that I absolutely hated? Well, to answer that question, let me instead ask you another question. Have you ever been in the thick of something and hated doing it so much, hated going through it, but when you're removed from that situation, you actually like it? I'm sure we can all think of a situation in our lives that fits this description. If you have ever said, "I wish I could just go back there," or "I wish I could do that again," then you know what I'm talking about. I bet even some of you have been thinking that way about school since we shut down for the rest of the school year in March. You are not alone. I too felt that way, and this is from somebody who liked going to school every day normally, and I still missed it more than I thought I would. My hiking experience was definitely one that fell into this category of, "I wish I could just go back there." Granted, there were a lot of negative feelings that I felt when I was on this trip. I've already mentioned those. However, when I got home and I started to reflect on the trip, I strangely began to forget all those bad things that I thought in the moment, in the top of the mountain, and instead I began to think about all the awesome things that I overlooked in the moment. At the top of the mountain, the horizon seems just to stretch on forever. The mountain peaks roll into expansive valleys, and the feeling I get is one of smallness or insignificance. In truth, the world is so big, and most of it will never be seen by my eyes. When I think about it, almost every day of my life, I see the same things as the day before. I go to the same places, I see the same people, I experience the same everything. And although usually those things are pretty good in my own little corner of the world called Moravia, one begins to wonder what else is out there to see. But every once in a while, the opportunity arises for me to see just a little bit more of the world than I usually do. And those moments are truly special. So the top of the mountain is one of those moments for me. So my second lesson for you all is this. Slow down and see the world around you. I have "see" in quotation marks, meaning like actually see it. It's so easy for us to fly through our lives without actually slowing down. We are always trying to get somewhere. There's so many things competing for our time. that we move on so quickly from one thing to another, but we never actually leave ourselves enough time to observe the world around us or to simply think. When we're zooming through life at 100 miles an hour, we miss some critical details. You miss people, you miss cool places, and you might even miss hearing your own thoughts. All of these things can be awesome if you slow down just enough to listen to them or see them. So take the time, slow down, and truly see the world around you at the moment. Now, to conclude my story about hiking, last year I had the opportunity to go back to the Adirondacks to climb Mount Marcy for a second time. My dear friend, and dare I say local legend, Chris Chapman, wanted... He's a popular guy, I know. He wanted to hike the tallest mountain in New York as a bucket list sort of thing. So I was the one that he asked to go with him since I had hiked it before. I agreed, vowing that I would not make the same mistakes as before. I would have a positive attitude through the trip. I would slow down and try to appreciate what I saw along the way and at the top of the mountain. Now, when we made it to the top of the mountain, I sat down and I just looked out over the horizon for like 30 minutes and just sat there. I drank in the view, as my friend Mike would say.
An old mill, right?
The view was way better than I remembered it being 4 years earlier. But this time I saw something new that I hadn't noticed before. All the way down the mountain, I could see the trail that we had hiked up to get to the top. Okay, it's not really that noteworthy, but I'm going somewhere. In that moment, I was able to see very clearly where I had been just a few minutes earlier. I looked down the mountain, I saw milestones, places I recognized as having passed by. I could see my progress laid out like a map on the side of the mountain. I actually went somewhere from there to here. I accomplished something. It was a good feeling. And what do you know, in that moment, I began to appreciate every single step that I took on that journey. The easy steps, the hard steps, all of them. The reason I can appreciate all of them is because if I remove just one of the 10,000 steps that it took me to get to the top of the mountain, then I would never have made it. Just one of them, and I would have fallen just one step short. I think that this is probably a good metaphor for life itself. I hate to bring in English class, but I see Miss Horan and Miss Shea back there, so there you go. It's a good metaphor for life itself, and it's also my final piece of advice that I would give you tonight. The final lesson is this. Take time to appreciate where you have been. Now, this is often easier said than done. It was very easy for me to look down the mountain and see the path that I had just hiked. But in life, it's often much more challenging. It's very difficult to look back on your life and try to figure out how you became the person that you became. I believe that your character, who you are as a person, is defined by a series of choices. You make choices every single moment of the day. What am I going to think about? How am I going to treat this person that I'm talking to? How am I going to use my time? All of these choices, while small and not really meaningful in the long run on their own, they have a tendency to add up over time. One day you wake up and you've lost all recognition of who you once were because your choices have taken you very far away from that place. But on the opposite side, choices can also lead you to be just a little bit better than you were the day before. I hope that you make the little choices to be just a bit better every day. Make the choice to give more to the people around you than you take from them. Pretty soon you won't have to make the conscious effort because it will become second nature to you. And you'll be a better friend to you, or you'll be a better friend to those around you in the process. Now, related to this final lesson is what I will call a bonus lesson. This is like the moment at the end of class when there's like a minute left and the bell's about to ring and I'm like, okay, we got like time for 3 more things. Okay, you know what I'm talking about because that happens all the time. It happens all the time. So, yeah, that's what it's like. You know what I'm talking about. The bonus lesson is, here's the bonus lesson. You should take time to appreciate where you've been, but you should also appreciate what you have in the moment. Okay, not just looking backwards, but looking at yourself in the moment. And given that this is your graduation from high school, it's a bit of a big moment in your lives, I think that we should take some time and think about where we are right now. You all, the graduates that are being honored through this ceremony, are about to set out on a journey that will take you to new places, meeting new people, and experiencing new things. This journey will broaden your horizon, both literally and figuratively. Whether your next steps are moving on to the workforce, college, the military, or anything else that you may have planned, you are entering into a period of uncertainty, discomfort, and seemingly more questions than answers. And I'm sorry that you have to enter into the world at this time. But what do you have that's undeniable? What do you have in this moment? You have a school that supports you wholeheartedly. You have people who fought tooth and nail to be able to give you a proper graduation tonight. You have parents and family members and friends who have supported you through everything and would be here tonight if they could be. You have hundreds of people who have tuned in and have watched this graduation online to support you. You have an amazing community that lines up in hundreds of cars on a Wednesday night in May just to drive past the school and honk their horns and celebrate your accomplishments. I'd say we have a lot to appreciate in this moment. 8 o'clock?
Dinner time!
I say this, all of this, to help you realize that you are not alone in what you are going through. In the future, you may feel alone at times, but when those times arise, think back to this milestone moment in your lives. You have an entire community behind you and supporting you every step of the way, looking forward to sharing in your successes in the future, whatever those may be. This school, this community, this place, it's truly special, and you will always have a home here no matter how far away life takes you. As you move forward from this place, or from this school, do not forget what you've learned here or the experiences that have shaped you into who you are. Remember that you are what you think and that your attitude determines your outcome. Try to slow down and truly see the world around you. And perhaps most of all, take time to appreciate where you have been and what you have. So now, to the Moravia High School class of 2020, this school has taught you everything that we can teach you. You are now ready to go forward into the world, making it just a little bit better every day, seeking truth, fighting for what you believe in, and making a life for yourself. But for you and me both, the next 10 years of our lives start now, today. So live them well. Thank you.